Hi ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Interpretation and Translation Job Outlook. How does it work? And how is it looking actually? All the things in the market. How is the career in the market really when it comes to work? Here we have job ready for interpretation and translation, people, society, business and economics, the module. And as you know, we have covered certain modules where you had probably the idea already that interpreters work in spoken or sign language, while translators work in a written language, obviously. So there are some quick facts. They can change from year to year, but just a brief look at it. So 40,000 something per year for a given time recently, and 20 something per hour, and a bachelor's degree is mostly asked for that. And work experience, maybe not even, you can start from the scratch, and long-term on-the-job training is okay. And a lot of jobs, more than 50,000 jobs were in recent years, and it goes on and on and on and on. And 40% much faster than average. Ladies and gentlemen, these are maybe some of the old figures, and it changes every time during the years. But main thing is, you should think that even if we have recessions or the world economy goes up or down, these kind of jobs are always asked because people need to communicate in good times and bad times. So it's good to be having that. And let's look at further what interpreters and translators do. Let's remember them in a brief meaning. Interpreters and translators convert information from one language to another. Interpreters work in spoken or sign language, we told, and translators in written language. How about the work environment? Interpreters work in settings such as schools, hospitals, courtrooms, and conference centers. And many translators work from home. You can do that. Both interpreters and translators who are self-employed frequently have variable schedules. So you can actually you are your own boss basically, like with your clients. That also brings some responsibilities and some knowledge, some know-how. We'll cover that now here today. How to become an interpreter and translator in the first place. Although interpreters and translators typically need a bachelor's degree, you can guess, the most important requirement is that they be fluent in English and at least one other language. Many complete job-specific training programs require that. Pay can change, but generally it is 40 something. It can be up and down according to the year, according to the economy, but it's not a bad one, I can tell you that. And job outlook. Employment of interpreters and translators is expected to grow more than 40% from 2010 to 2020, maybe even more later on. As I told you that it's changing with the economy, but people always need to communicate. Actually, the more we have problems in the world, the more we will need you guys to communicate and have some consensus between the countries, between the companies, in the courtroom. And employment growth will be driven by broadening international ties and by large increases in the number of non-English speaking people in the United States. You know that. Job opportunities should be best for those who have professional certification. So if you are kind of capable of speaking another language, here is the way and here's the chance to use it in the United States or anywhere in the world. Similar occupations. Compare the job duties, education, job growth, and pay of interpreters and translators with similar occupations. Like this is just a brief comparison to give you an idea where you are at in the market. ONET is one of them, provides comprehensive information on key characteristics of workers and occupations. You can go to our e-library and find more sources for sure, and also Google up yourself. Learn more about interpreters and translators by contacting these additional resources. It's always good to know, it's always good to research before you ever make a step. What interpreters and translators do, let's look at briefly again. Interpreters and translators speak, read, and write in at least two languages frequently and fluently. Frequently and fluently, that's true. Interpreters and translators convert information from one language to another. Interpreters work in spoken or sign language, translators in written language. While we are repeating that, in order to avoid any misinterpretation. As you know, interpretation has several meanings. Duties. Interpreters and translators typically do the following. Let's look at it together. Convert concepts in the source language to equivalent concepts in the target language. You understand here what we mean with the concept. It is mostly adaptation involved in this job. Speak, read, and write fluently in at least two languages, including English and one more others. Relay, style, and tone. So you will also have a style and a tone according to the document you're dealing with or the environment you're dealing with. Manage work schedules to meet deadlines. Very important to be on time. Render spoken ideas accurately, quickly, and clearly, and all together. Interpreters and translators aid communication by converting information from one language into another. Although some people do both, which is actually probably exciting to do, interpreting and translating are different professions. Interpreters deal with spoken words and translators with written words. You might choose where you feel more at home. Interpreters convert information from one spoken language into another, or in the case of sign language interpreters, between spoken language and sign language. Interpreters must usually be fluent speakers or signers of both languages because they communicate back and forth among the people who do not share each other's language. So basically it's like two pieces of land and there is water in between and you are the only bridge between them. You see how important it is. There are two modes of interpreting: simultaneous or simultaneous, however, and consecutive. Simultaneous interpreting requires interpreters to listen or watch and speak or sign at the same time someone is speaking or signing. Simultaneous interpreting requires a high level of concentration, as you can guess. Can you imagine? While I am talking, you are saying the same things with maybe 1 second difference in another language in the same time? That goes like that. I'd like to do that right now and show it to you how it goes, because I tried a couple of times and I did it even professionally once, but I don't have anybody to do that now, but you can imagine. For the reason, simultaneous interpreters usually work in pairs, each interpreting for about 20 to 30 minutes and then resting while the other interprets. Simultaneous interpreters are often familiar with the subject matter, so they can anticipate at the end of a speaker's sentences. Ladies and gentlemen, I can remember in my younger days there was Balkanic Medical Union meeting in Istanbul, Union Médicale Balkanique. And my father was a professor and a member and a participant, and I have been given the task at the time to be the simultaneous interpreter from French to Turkish. Can you imagine? French is my 4th language. And I was 18, but I had a full of energy for sure, way more than now. I can remember how I sweat and how I shivered, but it went well. And that was probably the first virus I got for the languages and translation and interpretation altogether. In contrast, consecutive interpreting begins only after the speaker has said or signed a group of words or sentences. Consecutive interpreters often take notes while listening to or watching the speakers, so they must develop some type of note-taking or shorthand system. When we talk about shorthand system, it's really good to learn that. I mean, you can always gather other skills, always look around, what else can you add to your current skills to become a better one in interpreting and translating. Don't just rely on the languages you know very well. You might need additional skills you can get easily. Translators convert written materials from one language into another. The goal of a translator is to have people read the translation as if it were the original. To do that, translator must be able to write sentences that flow as well as the original did, while keeping the ideas and facts of the original accurate. I mean, it sounds very easy, but can you imagine how deep you have to think about that? It's not word by word translation as we mentioned in the first modules. You have to get the same flow like a river, and the same thought and the same meaning, not only word by word, conceptually. Translator must consider any cultural references, including slang and other expressions that do not translate literally. We have given some examples from that, but really, you have to master the languages you speak so well that you should know where is what, and that every single phrase has a different meaning in a different language. Translators must read the original language fluently, but may not need to speak it fluently. They usually translate only into their native language. Here, I want to give you an example. Since I'm also dealing with the language teaching, we have different skills. So you have to ask yourself to decide on which and how and what. Some people are better in comprehension with reading. Some people are better in reading and writing. Some people are better speakers. They have oral, audio-linguistic, basically, ability, and they can capture what they were hearing and easily translate or transform it into their other language. So you have to know where you're better at and decide accordingly. If you feel confident in all the skills which requires, then go for both. Interpreters and translator services are needed in a number of subject areas. Although these workers often do not specialize in any particular field or industry, many focus on one area of expertise. Let's look at some of them. The following are examples of occupational specialities. You cannot know everything. In the long term, you'll be choosing a specialization, probably like one of these here. Health or medical interpreters and translators typically work in healthcare settings and help patients communicate with doctors, nurses, and other medical staff. Both interpreters and translators must have a strong grasp of medical terminology and the common words for those medical terms in both languages. So if you're probably studying or have studied one of the majors like medicine, biology, or anything connected to human health, and master a couple of languages, maybe that's exactly for you. Health or medical interpreters must also have sensitivity to participate in patients' personal situations with healthcare providers. Because it's not only the sentence sometimes. You have to think of the feeling of the patient. Or when you're translating or interpreting, maybe the doctor is too strict or too insensitive, say. There again, you are the bridge to maybe avoid a disaster or maybe a discouragement in the patient. So it's very, how can I say, it's such a responsibility in that, because one wrong interpretation can totally disturb the psychology of the patient, or the doctor will have a wrong information from the patient and go with a wrong diagnosis, or more than maybe a wrong treatment. So you can understand how important it is. And health or medical translator don't usually have the same level of personal interaction with patients. It's not all the time. And providers that interpreters do. They primarily convert information brochures, so that's another issue, materials that patient must read and sign, and website information from one language to the other. So you don't have to be necessarily there all the time between the doctor and the patient. Sometimes you might be dealing with brochures and forms and all kinds of written material. Now the other section, the other specialization area, legal or judiciary interpreters and translators. They typically work in courts and other legal settings, at hearings, arraignments, depositions, and trials. They help people who have limited English proficiency. They must understand legal terminology. Many court interpreters must sometimes read documents aloud in a language other than that in which they were written, a task known as sight translation, reading and translating right away. You might actually watch the news sometimes. There are sometimes criminals passing across to other countries, and they're captured in other countries, and then they're going to be jailed for a while, and then they'll be deported or sent back, extracted to the other country. So you might be thinking, so how are they able to communicate? Not every single criminal is bilingual or trilingual, so they might need those interpreters to clear the case. Literary translators rewrite journal articles, books, poetry, and short stories from one language into another language. That can be more relaxing, maybe, because there is not so much life depending on it, but still, if you want to have a career, you have to do it with the same attention and precise interpretation and translation, because one little mistake can cause you the job. So don't think that it is easier. Only maybe the life doesn't depend on it, but your career might depend on it. So pay attention every time. Okay, they strive to keep the author's tone and style as well as meaning. Whenever possible, literary translators work closely with authors to capture their intended meaning and literary characteristics. Here, ladies and gentlemen, you have the bridge position actually with the original author. So you have to understand the style, what the author really wants to pass on, and then go together with it accordingly. That's also a very, very big responsibility in that. Localization translators adapt text for a product or service from one language into another. Localization specialists strive to make it appear as though the product originated in the country where it will be sold. Do you remember this localization when we were talking about adaptation, like intercultural from one culture to the other? Because certain things, certain manners, certain procedures might differ from country to country. So when you deal with the commercial stuff, you might exactly know what the country's system is. That's what it means here. They must know not only both languages, but they must also understand the technical information they are working with and must understand the culture of the people who will be using the product or service. So depth, cultural depth is definitely required here. Localization may include adapting internet sites, marketing materials, instruction manuals, and other publications. Usually, these are related to products and services in manufacturing and other business sectors. That's very interesting because you're going to be dealing with many countries and how all the things, all the systems are being transferred one to the other. It's not only text translation here. You are dealing with the country's systems. Localization may be helped by computer-assisted translation. You remember this beautiful software and computer, the gadgets, but you have to pay attention to them and don't leave them alone. Where a computer program develops an early draft of a translation for the localization translator to work with. Also, translators may use computers to compare previous translations with current assignments. So you always have to look for the history of what you're doing, because people have done things. You can definitely go from them, not in terms of copying, in terms of understanding how it works. Not copying at all, but you can research. You can research and create your own by looking at internet sources for sure. Now we are with the sign language interpreters. Help people who are deaf or hard of hearing and people who can hear communicate with each other. Wow. Sign language interpreters must be fluent in English, and in American Sign Language we call it ASL, which combines signing, finger spelling, and specific body language. ASL is a separate language from English with its own grammar. So here you have to get to know really how it works and be trained for that. Some interpreters specialize in other forms of interpreting for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Some people who are deaf or hard of hearing lip read English instead of signing in ASL. Interpreters who work with these people do oral interpretation, mouthing speech silently and very carefully so their lips can be read easily. They may also use facial expressions and gestures to help the lip reader understand. For example, I can relate to that well because I was a voice coach for dubbing and commercial dubbing, gave my voice to many productions. And when you synchronize your lips with the actor or with whoever speaks on the screen, you can actually get this ability with time. So for example, I will say something to you and you're going to probably understand what I am saying here without the voice. Interpretation and translation is very, very important. A hardly hearing person might understand what I have said right now just looking at my lips. So that's basically how that works. Other specialties include using cute speech, which uses hand shapes placed near the mouth to give lip readers more information, signing exact English, and tactile signing, which is interpreting for people who are blind as well as deaf by making hand signs into the deaf blind person's hand. So communication is, as you see, totally limitless as long as you master it. There is a guide or escort interpreters accompany either US visitors abroad or foreign visitors in the United States to ensure that they are able to communicate during their stay. These specialists interpret informally and on a professional level. Frequent travel for these workers is common. So you're going to travel with these people. Conference interpreters we also mentioned, but here let's look at it again. They work at conferences that have non-English speaking attendees. The work is often in the field of international business or diplomacy, although conference interpreters can interpret for any organization that works with speakers of foreign languages. Employers prefer high-level interpreters who have the ability to translate from at least 2 languages into one native language. For example, the ability to interpret from Spanish and French into English. For some positions, such as those with the United Nations, this qualification is required. You can actually go to the page of United Nations and look. I was recently looking for another reason, and I saw that how people are looking and what kind of job opportunities are there. It's a very interesting area to have a research. Conference interpreters often do simultaneous interpreting. People at the conference who do not understand the language of the speaker wear earphones tuned to the interpreter who speaks the language they want to hear. The interpreter listens to a bit of the speaker's talk and then translates a bit. Simultaneous interpreters must be able to listen to the next bit the speaker is saying while translating the previous bit of what the speaker said. Did you realize the sentence I recently read? How difficult it might be? Imagine somebody talking ongoingly and you are translating. While you are translating the sentence which has been spoken, you have the other ear is listening to the upcoming part and is ready to translate that. You know what? People who are doing that are not genius. They are well-trained, smart people, and you can be one of them. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's look at the work environment a little bit. Interpreters and translators generally work indoors in comfortable spaces. Interpreters and translators held about more than 50, maybe 60,000 jobs in 2000 something years, and about 20-something percent were self-employed. These are past numbers. It changes, but it's growing. The industries that employed the most interpreters and translators in 2010-ish were professional, scientific and technical services, more than 20 then. Can you imagine how it's now? Educational services, state, local and private, more than 20. Healthcare and social assistance, 13-ish at the time, and government, 7 so far then. Now it's growing because the need for the interpretation and translation is going ongoingly, so we cannot stuck with those numbers. Always you have to refresh what's coming on, but the insight is very good. I mean, the future is very good, that we can say already. Interpreters work in settings such as schools, hospitals, courtrooms, again the work environment, and conference centers. They must sometimes travel to conferences, that's the exciting part maybe, and simultaneous interpreting can be stressful, as you might guess now, as the interpreter must keep up with the speaker's pace, who may not know to slow down when an interpreter is present. You know, they don't have any compassion for that, or they don't even think about it, that it's being translated at the time. They are only delivering their message. Either they are politicians or ministers or members of parliament or visitors or scientists, whatever. They are only interested in delivering their message as accurately and as clearly as possible, without thinking of, my God, I have to slow down and have a break and have a breath that the translator can keep up with me. No, they wouldn't probably think about that. Translators typically work from home. This was the interpreters. Translators typically work from home. They receive and submit their work electronically. They must sometimes deal with the pressure of deadlines and tight schedules. That's very important because, ladies and gentlemen, we were always discussing amongst colleagues here, like home working, like homeschooling and going to school, home working and going to work. There are certain psychological negatives in working at home, because psychologically you feel very comfortable in your home. If you don't think that your home is your workplace, you might be a little bit tending to be lazy, which this job definitely doesn't allow you to do so. So being on time, keeping your deadlines is crucial if you really want to have a career with this. Work schedules. Because many interpreters and translators are self-employed, their schedules often vary, and with alternating periods of limited work and periods of long, irregular hours. Still, most work full-time during regular business hours, because you have to communicate with the client and exchange information in business hours. You can't do it at 3 a.m. unless you are working with a time difference with the country. Then you should really adjust and adapt your hours to the client in that case. How to become an interpreter and translator. Now, we already covered so many things, and you got it, and you want to do it, and you're capable, you're able. No, let's show you the way. Some interpreters and translators attain a degree in specialty area, such as finance. Although interpreters and translators typically need a bachelor's degree, the most important requirement is that they be fluent in English and at least one other language. Many complete job-specific training programs require that. It's not necessary for interpreters and translators to have been raised in 2 languages to succeed in these jobs, but many grew up communicating in both languages in which they work. In my case, my mother language is Turkish. I went to a German school and then studied in Germany and Austria, and then now I'm in North America. So I was not necessarily raised when I was a kid with English and German, but when you think about that, I actually was encountering German when I was 11. I can maybe think that I was raised with it, but not my home language. So it doesn't matter when did you acquire your second or third language. You should be only very good at it. That's the thing. Education. The educational backgrounds of interpreters and translators vary, but it is essential that they be fluent in English and at least one other language. Having said that, high school student interested in becoming an interpreter and translator should take a broad range of courses that includes English writing and comprehension, foreign languages, and computer proficiency. So you know, here, already in high school, so when you're 16, 17, 18, before that actually, you should be taking those classes, those courses, to have a nice base. Maybe you have done already, otherwise you wouldn't listen to me now. And other helpful pursuits for prospective foreign language interpreters and translators include spending time abroad, engaging in direct contact with foreign cultures, and reading extensively on a variety of subjects in English and at least one other language. For example, exchange programs of universities can help you with that, like going to other countries, traveling. And when you're traveling, even when you're traveling with your family for a holiday, just don't look around and just enjoy the sightseeing. Get to know the culture. Try to talk to the locals and get to know the culture better. That helps you. Through community organizations, students interested in sign language interpreting may take introductory classes in ASL, we told you, and seek out volunteer opportunities to work with people who are deaf or hard of hearing. So that requires another training. Beyond high school, people interested in becoming an interpreter or translator have many educational options. Although a bachelor's degree is often required for jobs, majoring in a language is not always necessary. An educational background in a particular field of study can provide a natural area of subject matter expertise. Well, in case of mine, I have drama background, like my major is drama, and then I have studied languages, and then I have studied English teaching, but all that opened my brain to many languages. But you can go from finance, you can go from medicine. I was also teaching medical English since I also have studied veterinary English. So again, it depends wherever your interest area is, you can actually go there more further with the knowledge and with gathering information and prepare yourself for the job. However, interpreters and translators generally need specialized training on how to do the work. Formal programs in interpreting and translating are available at colleges and universities nationwide and through non-university training programs, conferences, and courses. Many people who work as conference interpreters or in more technical areas such as localization, engineering, or finance have a master's degree. Those working in the community as court or medical interpreters or translators are more likely to complete job-specific training programs. Again, when you are dealing with engineering and finance, because they require a broader knowledge of phrases and vocabulary and terminology and system. We were talking about the system, how the trade works, how law works, how the financial system works in this or the other country. In order to even understand your own country's system, you have to have a master's degree in that. But if you go for the medical interpreters, just you have a biology, it's maybe okay, or healthcare personnel. And if you want to be the court interpreter, then you have to have maybe a course about it to understand. So there's actually not one way to go. It's all about you should be knowledgeable and you should be having your head very consciously into your pillow. When you actually have a head on your pillow, you should say, I did a good job. I am capable of doing that. I am not cheating on myself. I am not cheating on my client. And we always say, if you get a job, if you get an offer, if somebody asks you to do something where you feel you're not capable of doing it because you're not knowledgeable, please don't take it. Don't take it until you feel really confident in that specific area. Because one mistake can either cost somebody's life, cost somebody's freedom in a court, or cost your career, even if you just translate a poetry. So that's very delicate. Please be very honest with your knowledge, with your intention, and please also learn to say no, although money is really attractive. But when you do like that, money comes more. So, having said that, Certifications, let's look at them. You don't have to have a master's degree for every kind of translation interpretation. There are certifications you can go through. There is currently no universal certification required of interpreters and translators. However, workers can take a variety of tests that show proficiency. For example, the American Translators Association provides certification for its members in 24 language combinations involving English. Good to have one on your wall. Federal courts provide certifications for Spanish, Navajo, and Haitian Creole interpreters, and many state and municipal courts offer their own forms of certification. National Association of Judiciary Interpreters and Translators also offers certification for court interpreting. So as you know that you don't have to have a master's in law, but if you have one, that's a big asset for sure. The National Association of Deaf and the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, RID, jointly offer certification for general sign language interpreters. There you have to be trained because you don't know it. Nobody knows it before. You'll learn it. In addition, the registry offers specialty tests in legal interpreting, speech reading, and deaf-to-deaf interpreting, which includes interpreting among deaf speakers with different native languages and from ASL to tactile signing. You see how deep it goes and how variety it offers? The US Department of State has a 3-test series for prospective interpreters, 1 test in simple consecutive interpreting for escort work, another in simultaneous interpreting for court or seminary work, and a 3rd in conference-level interpreting for international conferences, as well as a test for prospective translators. Beautiful. Just research. Go get it. These tests are not considered a credential, but their completion indicates that a person has significant skill in occupation. Also, ladies and gentlemen, whatever you do, we also told you, but I never bother saying it again, whatever you do in this job, you have to update your knowledge. The world is turning around and spinning. The time passes. Everything is changing. The country's systems have changed so far since I have started doing things. So you have to read a lot, you have to research a lot, and you have to polish and brush up your knowledge a lot. So even if you are, say, a very capable lawyer already, you studied law and you even work as a lawyer and you are very fantastically in it, get more knowledge. Read everything. If you want to do this and get more, like what do the conference interpreters say to that? Well, there is a conference and they're discussing international law. What are you going to do? Maybe it's none of your branch. Then you have to be knowledgeable in that. Curiosity might kill the cats, but definitely might help the interpreters and translators. The International Association of Conference Interpreters offers certification for conference interpreters. For example, why should you not have one? That looks good on your wall too, and also in your brain. The Certification Commission for Healthcare Interpreters offers 2 types of certifications for healthcare interpreters. The Associate Healthcare Interpreter, AHI, for interpreters of languages other than Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin, and the Certified Healthcare Interpreter, CHI, for interpreters of Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. Advancement. After interpreters and translators have enough experience, now we assume that you're there, they may move up to more difficult or prestigious assignments, seek certification, get editorial responsibility, or manage or start their own business. How does this sound now to you? You're already self-employed, you were already self-employed, but now maybe you are going to employ. Maybe you are going to have partners, your own business. Let's think about it. Many self-employed interpreters and translators start a business by establishing themselves in their field. They may submit resumes and samples to many different translation and interpreting agencies and work for agencies that match their skills with a job. Many then get work based on their reputation or through referrals from existing clients. So one job brings the other. One status, one reputation brings a bigger one. That's the good thing in here. Work experience. That's essential, as it says here. In fact, some agencies hire only interpreters or translators who have related work experience. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a vicious circle in North America or even in Canada, where I have been working for a long time. On the one hand, an employer wants you to be experienced. On the other hand, you need the job to be experienced. So how can I gather experience without being hired in the first place? That's a nice dilemma North America is actually causing to people who are starters. So I have to prove myself with a reference, with an experience, but to do so, I have to have started somewhere. I have to have done something. Do you remember we were talking about volunteering? I got my job with volunteering as a teacher and translator. And these volunteering agencies didn't pay me any money, or schools. They just wrote nice references. That was, I think, precious and priceless. So with these references, I was able to get my immigration and then later on my citizenship, and everything I had was based on this voluntary work, which is fantastically big opportunity in North America. So you can do that. This is probably a handicap in the beginning. Well, they want to have an experience. I don't have one. You can have voluntary experience. You can go and do some internship work, and that will be definitely counted in. A good way for translators to learn firsthand about the occupation is to start working in-house for a translation company. Doing informal or volunteer work, there you go, is an excellent way for people seeking to get interpreter or translator job to get experience. Volunteer opportunities for interpreters are available through community organizations, hospitals, and sporting events such as marathons that involve international competitors. The American Translation Association works with the Red Cross to provide volunteer interpreters during crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many people out there who like to have talented people working for them where they don't have to have being paid for that. So, and then you can actually get that. Don't feel exploited or abused or something, because the reference you're going to get is priceless. Maybe it's better than them paying you this little paper which shows what you have done for them. So use that opportunity. Paid or unpaid internships are other ways that interpreters and translators can get experience. Escort interpreting may offer an opportunity for inexperienced candidates to shadow or work alongside a more experienced interpreter. Did we talk about that term? Are you sure everybody? Sorry, I can't hear you. Shadowing? Shadowing. Looking over the shoulder. In North America, it's possible. I don't know in other countries whether they started that, but it is like, can I please work around and walk around in your company and observe the job and get a training? I don't want to have money, I just want to have a bit of an experience. That can be dealt with the company, and that's called shadowing. A more experienced interpreter. Okay. Interpreters also might find it easier to break into areas with particularly high demand for language services, such as court or medical interpreting. To show experience in translation, any translation, even translation done as practice, can be used as a sample for potential clients. Don't ever throw away anything you worked on. Everything can count. Whatever path of entry they pursue, new interpreters and translators should develop relationships with mentors to build their skills, confidence, and professional network. Mentoring may be formal, such as with a coworker or an acquaintance who has experience as an interpreter or translator. Both the American Translators Association and the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf offer formal mentoring programs. Now we know where to go, how to start, what to learn, what to do. But how about personal qualities, which cannot be actually learned, but if in the case a lack of, it can be worked on. So let's look at what kind of a person you have to be. Business skills. Self-employed and freelance interpreters and translators need general business skills to manage their finances and careers successfully. They must set prices for their work, build customers, keep records, and market their services to attract new business and build their client base. So you're going to be your own accountant unless you want to pay one. You understand? So the paperwork, everything you have to understand from finances, at least to run your own business. When you really understand too much of it, then you can be a financial translator later on or help somebody. Concentration, ladies and gentlemen. The ability to concentrate while others are speaking or moving around them is critical for interpreters and translators. If you are a person who can only work and study, like many young people do, if everything is silent most of the time, the late night, and you don't want to hear a word, you don't want to hear a sound, then you have to get used to it. Maybe start to have the radio on first, somebody talking in the room, or television on, and get used to having some outer sounds not distracting you. That's a good training you can do yourself if you're already not okay with it. Cultural sensitivity. Interpreters and translators must be sensitive to cultural differences and expectations among the people whom they are helping to communicate. Successful interpreting and translating is not only a matter of knowing the words in different languages, but also of understanding people's cultures. Dexterity. Sign language interpreters must have a quick and coordinated hands, fingers, and arm movements when interpreting sign language for targeted audience. You know, you don't have to have a ballet or like an illusionist, but you have to really have motoric ability to do that. Listening skills. Interpreters and translators must listen carefully when interpreting for audiences to ensure that they interpret or translate correctly. I think this is active listening, ladies and gentlemen, not hearing, literally focusing, listening. And nothing can take you away from this focus. Even if a bomb explodes outside, you should still listen to the speaker and not break your focus. Speaking skills. Interpreters and translators must speak clearly in the languages they are translating. Even if you are a writing translator, you only deal with the written texts, you have to deal with the clients. You have to discuss things with the clients. So your speech must be really accurate, full of interesting vocabulary so that you can deal with it, and then also clear. Writing skills. Interpreters and translators must be able to write clearly and effectively in the languages they are talking in or translating. When we talk about writing skills here, it's not necessarily your handwriting. Today we are having computers and everything. Otherwise, I would definitely say that look at your handwriting and make it clearly understandable. But here, there's another component, punctuation. Punctuation rules, which can change a sentence to a totally different meaning if you don't take care of it. And what else do we have here? Pay. That's the nicest part, I guess. That's what you were waiting for. Yes, interpreters and translators will be paid not badly. I mean, according to the circumstances in our world. So media and communication workers have, by the year 2000 and something, about 40,000 something a year, which has definitely changed to our time now. Interpreters and translators, a bit lower than that, but still in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits. And total all occupations are 30-something, were 30-something, has also changed by now, and changing rapidly because the world needs you more and more and more, ladies and gentlemen. Note, all occupations includes all occupations in the U.S. economy. Source, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistic, Occupational Employment Statistic. You can always go and get the latest numbers from there. The median annual wage of interpreters and translators, we gave a number here for the 2010, and then you can look at all these numbers and the junior colleagues and the senior colleagues, and you see that they're not hungry. I mean, they can definitely make a living here. And also in the hospitals, in the local government, elementary and secondary schools, it is good. It is not bad. It's definitely similar to a teacher, like an English teacher or any other works. Unless you have your own business, you can make a lot of money when you run your own business, for sure. And even employ people and even hire people. Wages depend on the language, subject matter, skill, and experience, education, certification, and type of employer. Wages of interpreters and translators vary widely. Interpreters and translators who know languages for which there is a greater demand or that relatively few people can translate often earn higher wages, as do those who perform services requiring a high level of skill, such as conference interpreters. Actually, combining your skills brings you more money, better job, and better reputation. So you can actually start, don't make it too big in your eye, you can start as a simple and humble but knowledgeable translator, and then you can feel that you speak really convincingly and you can put the words together fantastically, and then you can switch into interpreting a little bit, and then you can maybe detect that you are having a bit of a vein for medical or sport or any other area, and then you can go step by step. You can actually advance yourself. You're not going to start doing it for 50 years. And for those who are not salaried, earnings typically fluctuate depending on the availability of work. Self-employed interpreters usually charge an hourly rate. Self-employed translators typically charge a rate per word or per hour. That can change as well. How can I determine what I'm going to charge? Look it up. Look at the wages. Talk to people, go to the sites, look at the forums. I told you, it involves a lot of research and curiosity. Because many interpreters and translators are self-employed, their schedules may vary, with alternating periods of limited work and periods of long, irregular hours. Still, most work full-time during regular business hours because probably your clients are working like that. Here is again another prediction, number prediction from Person Change in Employment projection basically, 2010 and 20. You can look at the figures here and you can see how all occupations are and the interpreters and translators are. Oh my God, am I losing time by teaching English? Should I be thinking going there again? I like that. Okay, note, all occupations includes all occupations again in US economy, employment of interpreters. They give you also some numbers here. Oh, that's interesting. Demand will likely remain strong for translators of frequently translated languages such as French, German, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish. Demand also should be strong for translators for Arabic and other Middle Eastern languages, and for the principal East Asian languages, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to learn Korean. I already have Turkish, French, German, English. Why am I doing this? Why am I telling things here? Hey, I want to go with you. No, I'm not going to leave you here. That's nice. I like camera. Okay. Okay, demand for American Sign Language interpreters is expected to grow rapidly, driven by the increasing use of video relay services, which allow people to conduct online video calls and use a sign language interpreter. Everything becomes technologically now. In addition, growing international trade and broadening global ties should require more interpreters and translators. I told you, the world needs you more and more. The need to interpret and translate languages in the military should result in more jobs as well. Sure. Computers have made the work of translators and localization specialists easier. However, these jobs cannot be entirely automated. Computers cannot yet produce work comparable to the work that human translators do. We told you already that one word can have 1,000 meanings and the computer wouldn't know which one to put there. Job prospects. Job opportunities should be best for those who have professional certification. That's obvious. In addition, urban areas, especially as example, Washington, D.C., New York, and Los Angeles, should continue to provide the largest number of employment possibilities, especially for interpreters. Job prospects for interpreters and translators should also vary by specialty and language. For example, interpreters and translators of Spanish should have good job opportunities because of expected increases in the population of Hispanics in the United States. In particular, job opportunities should be plentiful for interpreters and translators specializing in healthcare, in law, because of the critical need for all parties to fully understand that information. That's really critical. Again, lives and freedoms and everything hangs upon, so depends on your bridging properly. That's very important. In addition, there should be many job opportunities for specialists in localization, driven by the globalization of business and the expansion of the internet. Yes. Interpreters for the deaf will continue to have favorable employment prospects because there is a shortage of people with the needed skill levels. You see, the prospects are fine, beautiful, even if we stuck sometimes in financial difficulties as a whole world going down and up, recession and then inflation and then stagflation and whatever. But people are finding results. People are actually finding solutions. Yeah. European Union, United States, for example. How do they find solutions to their economical problems? Through you. Because you are helping them to communicate. So you see, you are always needed. Okay. Conference interpreters and literary translators will likely face competition because of the small number of job opportunities in these specialities. Look at your occupational title, interpreters, translators, the change, here again, a prospect, and some of the internet links here for you from our e-library. You can look at the prospect and all the options you have. But ladies and gentlemen, let it said from your big sister here, who has been in many, many languages and many, many areas of language exchange for many, many years. Please know what you are doing and don't just say, I know. Get more. Develop yourself. Advance yourself. You will wonder what kind of interesting areas you will discover, even for your own interest, not only business-wise. That's a deep ocean you would want to definitely delve and dive into and be happy and also make some money. Good luck.